Implementing forest biomass retention and harvesting guidelines in the Northeast. Biomass markets are growing across the country, and removal of biomass is being integrated into more and more harvests in the Northeast. The goal of this video is to introduce biomass harvesting guidelines for land managers or operators. We'll focus on how guidelines affect landowners, foresters, loggers, and forest management companies. A key place to start is, what is woody biomass? Technically, the term woody biomass includes all trees and woody plants, both alive and dead, in the forest. Practically speaking, what we're talking about is logging slash, small diameter trees, tops, limbs, or trees that cannot be sold for higher value products. This material has traditionally been hard to sell in the Northeast, although in some cases biomass markets may overlap with existing pulp markets. So why do we need biomass harvesting guidelines? There's an increasing interest in forest biomass for energy use or for fuel. Demand for wood pellets in Europe has grown exponentially, and a new port has recently been put in Maine to ship wood pellets all the way to northern Europe. New harvesting machines allow for collection and use of material that was previously too costly to remove from the woods. The growing market for biomass means that we have new opportunities to remove low-grade material from our woods. These new markets may provide new sources of income for landowners and more jobs for foresters and loggers. Removing low-grade material from the forest may also help grow high-quality veneer and saw logs for the future. New markets and opportunities also means new responsibilities. Good biomass harvesting practices can enhance and improve forest land, while at the same time poor practices can damage or devalue it. Previous best management practices, BMPs, those commonly recommended by states across the Northeast, tend not to include guidance for how to deal with harvesting tops, limbs, and this low-value material because there hasn't been a market in the past. As new markets develop, we need to consider how we will build them into our long-term sustainable forest management. Recognizing the need for guidelines, a number of states have already created biomass harvesting recommendations. Maryland, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin have all published guidelines on what material should be left in the woods and how to conduct biomass harvesting operations that protect the forest. Our discussion here focuses on the Forest Guild guidelines that were developed by a working group of foresters and other experts based on the best available science, existing state biomass harvesting guidelines, and their professional experience as foresters. These guidelines cut across state boundaries and focus on forest types in the Northeast. The Forest Guild guidelines encourage protection of soils, wildlife habitat, water, and other forest attributes, such as large down logs that provide key wildlife habitat. One of the first considerations as we talk about forest biomass harvesting is to ensure the protection of rare forests and rare species. Biomass harvest should probably not happen in rare or threatened forests, unless they're designed to protect these areas. Rare or threatened forest types or species should already be listed or mapped as part of a forest management plan, so this won't be any big change for sustainable forestry operations. Now, biomass harvesting may be appropriate in sensitive sites if they're designed to control invasive species, enhance critical habitat, or even reduce wildfire risk. Biomass markets may pay for the removal of invasive species such as Norway maple or other exotics we want to take out from the forest but have little value. Landowners, foresters, and loggers may be able to work together to use these biomass markets to improve habitat by opening up areas and increasing early cereal habitat. Similarly, biomass harvest may help restore forests such as pitch pine communities that were naturally maintained by fire. Now, however, these restoration activities should be guided by ecological goals and not designed solely to supply biomass. One of the central elements of biomass harvesting and retention guidelines is the retention of tops, limbs, and other woody material, the stuff we used to call debris. When our working group talked about retention of tops, limbs, and small trees, we decided to focus on a common type of harvest in the Northeast, one where about 1/3 of the basal area is being removed every 20 years. Obviously, many harvests remove more material or occur more frequently, but this gives landowners, foresters, and loggers a baseline to compare other types of harvests. In these sorts of harvests, where about 1/3 of the basal area is removed every 20 years, we want to leave about 1/3 of the slash generated by that harvest. This translates into leaving the tops and limbs from every third tree felled during the harvest. In a whole tree harvesting operations, this might translate into leaving 1 out of every 4 small trees on site instead of dragging it to the landing. We recognize the skill of foresters to make decisions based on site conditions, and so the biomass retention guidelines are designed to be flexible. Foresters need to use their best professional judgment about how much slash should be kept on site. If there's already a lot of down logs or material there, then there may be no reason to leave more. Similarly, if it's a rich site with a high site index that won't be harvested again for a long time, then there's less need to keep foliage and slash on site. Although these guidelines are flexible, they serve as a reminder that some slash should be kept on site, and if less than 1/3 of the tops and limbs are being left on site, then there should be a clear reason why. A forester or logger should be able to explain to a landowner specifically why. There was already a lot of material, we're not coming back for a long time, there should be some reason, and this chart should help design a harvest to meet these needs. Now, in general, we want to avoid harvesting on low nutrient sites, or to be sure to leave enough woody biomass to replace the nutrients we remove. Leaves and needles have the highest concentration of nutrients, so it's particularly important we leave those on site. In some cases, it may be possible to harvest in winter so that no leaves are removed. And in some Scandinavian countries, the conifers are left on site a season before removal so that many of the needles and hence much of the nutrients remain on site. That may not be practical in the Northeast, but it's an example of how there's a focus on retaining these nutrients on site. One of the goals is to retain dead wood of all sizes within the stand, from the leaves and needles to the large down logs. While large down logs provide homes for mammals and are generally uncommon across the Northeast, brushy tops provide habitats for another set of animals, such as turkey. They protect new seedlings from deer browse and decay more quickly. So all of these types of woody biomass are important. In general, we want to leave dead wood distributed across the site. Where material piles up at the landing, some loggers have found that they can return it into the forest as the skidder goes back for another load. Even if this material is then left in small piles in the woods, it's better to leave it inside the stand than leave it at the landing, because it provides another kind of habitat and again brings those nutrients back into the forest. Now, the biomass harvesting guidelines recommend to leave and protect litter, forest floor, roots, and stumps, because while it's not currently common in the Northeast to remove this material, in some places these elements are removed for bioenergy, although the ecological impacts of removing stumps, etc., usually outweigh the energy or economic benefits. We're also concerned about snags, standing dead trees. In general, we want to leave and protect live cavity trees, den trees, and other live and decaying trees, as well as snags. Snags are unlikely to be harvested in a biomass operation, but because biomass markets may help us remove more of disease, suppressed, or dying trees in our forest, there'll be fewer snags, and we want to be sure that this crucial habitat element is maintained. Based on the best available science and the professional judgment in our working group, the Forest Guild guidelines contain these goals for the retention of snag and decaying trees. Ideally, stands would have 4 live trees that are decaying in the 12 to 18-inch size class per acre, and 1 even larger. These trees might be in riparian buffers or other areas that are already set aside for protection. And this is a target for mature forest stands and probably won't be achievable on every acre and every year, but they provide a goal. Where these structures don't currently exist, landowners and foresters may want to plan to increase the number over time as stands age or mature, and they can identify suppressed trees that can fill this role, the role of cavity tree or den tree in the future. Forest management plans can include these kinds of targets for snags and den trees. Moreover, these trees will become the large down logs of the future once they fall. Another crucial topic is water quality. Existing state best management practices, or BMPs, for water quality generally do a good job of ensuring the protection of clean water and aquatic habitats. Conscientious foresters and loggers have been following these BMPs for years, and biomass harvesting guidelines simply highlight the continued importance of these BMPs. There are some issues around water quality that may come up specifically on biomass harvests, such as protecting vernal pools, those depressions that fill up in the spring and provide critical habitat for amphibians. Biomass harvesting guidelines recommend keeping vernal pools free of slash, tops, branches, and sediment from forestry operations. However, it's important to note that logs and branches that are already in streams and ponds and lakes should be left and protected, since they provide important aquatic habitat. We encourage the involvement of a professional forester in the development of a long-term forest management plan and the supervision of forest harvests. Foresters can work with landowners to identify long-term goals for a forest land parcel, and they can partner with loggers to ensure harvests meet BMPs. This partnership can protect the long-term productivity of forests and all the other values we expect from forests, including wildlife habitat, recreation, and clean water. Foresters and loggers should work together to make sure the harvest equipment is well matched to the site and operation. For example, putting a large machine in a regenerating stand can damage the regeneration. Or in other cases, the use of a forwarder can help to minimize compaction and protect tree growth in the long term. Planning and marking skid trails also improves productivity and reduces soil compaction. Similarly, re-entering a site where timber was recently harvested to remove the biomass can increase site impacts and can harm post-harvest regeneration. So biomass harvesting should be integrated with the other forest operations, even if different logging contractors are involved. Working with multiple logging contractors to make sure that the harvest of saw logs and the harvest of biomass is well integrated is a great role for a professional forester. Now, at the landscape level, the guidelines encourage the protection of working forests. We would like to protect forest land from conversion to non-forest uses, or even biomass plantations that don't supply other forest attributes like wildlife habitat or recreation as well. We don't want to see biomass harvest encourage the development of houses or commercial buildings in our forest. Instead, we hope that the additional income from biomass harvest can help ensure our forested landscapes stay forested. One of the issues that often comes up around biomass harvesting is carbon. And although this is an issue that is out of the hands of most landowners, foresters, and loggers, it's worth pointing out that silviculture that encourages the development of structural complexity, older trees, multi-storied canopies, large down logs, that kind of silviculture encourages more carbon sequestration than silvicultural methods that create homogeneous conditions. Now, when we think about burning forest biomass for energy, it's worth understanding that burning slash or suppressed trees is better for the atmosphere than burning crop trees, because those crop trees could have become solid wood products that can sequester carbon for decades. So in summary, we feel biomass harvesting guidelines can help ensure that new markets for low-value forest biomass can become a useful tool for sustainable forestry, rather than another stress on our forests. And with that, we'll conclude this introduction to forest biomass harvesting and retention guidelines in the Northeast.